Just before I start in with the main part of the video today, I'd just like to say there are spiders actually featured in this picture. I didn't realise when I first chose it, but there are spiders that are in this picture, so anyone with arachnophobia, I would suggest not watching this video. Thank you for actually clicking on it, but please don't watch if you have arachnophobia. If you don't mind spiders, then please feel free to go ahead, watch the rest of the video. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hi everybody! As you can see today we do have the newspaper that I've put down there in the background, and that's because I'm thinking today we might be getting a little bit messy. There's also a couple of books because I was trying to decide which book I was going to be using today. And I think I have settled on the Tolkien's world, but I'll explain that in a little minute. But what I was thinking about trying to do today is colouring a whole page or a whole image just with chalk pastels, because we've all used chalk pastels for background and played around with them for giving some nice kind of soft background effects. But I was thinking the other day that I've never really tried colouring a whole picture with chalk pastels, and I was wondering if that was actually possible. Of course, I know there are artists out there who use chalk pastels and they can draw anything with them, but as a complete beginner, as most of us, I'm sure, I've only ever used the chalk pastels for a little bit of a background, kind of a soft background effect, maybe making a little bit of a bokeh effect in the background. That's the only thing I've ever used chalk pastels for, so it might be a little bit of an experiment to try and see if I could colour a whole image using them. And at first I thought, because they are quite a chunky little medium and you do have to spread them around quite a lot, I was thinking maybe a simple picture, picking a really simple picture with big shapes, maybe like Komodo Erico or something along those lines. But then I thought, well, hang on, maybe it might work if we used a kind of ink sketch kind of picture with lots of detail and let the ink show through and just make the chalk pastels look like some kind of a watercolour wash going on top of the ink. I thought maybe that might work quite nicely, and that kind of caught my imagination. And at first I was going to be using this book here, which doesn't fit in with my films and TV kind of theme that I wanted to have going on this month, but this is the kind of picture that I thought might work well with the chalk pastels. Let me show you a couple of different images from here. These are the kind of pictures that I thought might work well with a little bit of chalk pastel just as a wash over them. If I can find a good one. Yeah, something like this, with all the detail and a little bit of chalk pastel kind of acting like a watercolour wash over the top of that might work really well. And I might go on to try actually in this book after I've filmed today. Just take today as a little bit of a practice, but I thought to try and keep in with my films and TV theme that I wanted to have going on this month, I would work in the Tolkien's World book, because this is a book I've only ever coloured in once. So I thought I'd try and work in with this one, because obviously we do have the Lord of the Rings films and the Hobbits. I thought this might fit in quite nicely with the films and TV kind of theme. And there were quite a few pictures along the same lines as those Shadowscapes ones that I've showed you. There were quite a few in here. And mainly kind of landscapes, which are not something that I do, kind of like this one, landscapes that I do tend to shy away from colouring. Yeah, obviously something like this I do shy away from colouring, because it's not really the thing that I tend to gravitate towards. So I've picked a couple, and this is the first one I picked that I thought might be quite interesting, with this kind of river scene here, the greenery in the background. But what kind of put me off this one was this big empty space here. I really had no idea what I would be doing with that big empty space, so maybe that's one for another time. But I'll show you the picture that I did pick out to maybe try today. And yeah, pretty intimidating, I will say. But I think because it's such a detailed kind of pen and ink kind of drawing, if we just work over the top with the chalk pastels, putting a few kind of washy layers along the same lines as watercolour wash on there, let the ink show through. It should hopefully be quite quick as well, just as an aside, because we're just laying down the chalk and blending it out. It should be quite quick and easy, hopefully, and it shouldn't really make too much of a difference if we go over the lines, because for a start you can erase chalk pastels pretty easily, so that's something we could do. Or we could just let that kind of be our theme, kind of run with it, make it look as if it is kind of washy sort of watercolour, which is how I imagined in the first place. So I'll just show you the chalk pastels I do have before we start. First of all, I have these ones, and these were secondhand. Most of my chalk pastels were secondhand. I've just picked it randomly to maybe use as little bits of an experiment. These were ones that I got from eBay, kind of in a job lot of craft supplies, colouring books, and I've cleaned them up a little bit. They're a little bit broken, but these ones are really soft and chalky. They do leave a lot of pigment on the page and on your hands as well, unfortunately. They really are quite good. Those are called the Inscribe pastels. Another set that I have is this one, and I really couldn't tell you the manufacturer name of anything. Is it there? I have no idea what that says. Is that the manufacturer? I really don't know. These ones I also picked up from a charity shop for about £4, I think, these ones. And those are the range of colours I've got in there. I think there's 36 in that one. And those are quite nice. Only a couple of them broken there. They're not quite as soft as the first set, but they do work pretty well. And I thought there's a nice range of colours there. And my other set are ones I've had since back in my student days, I think these ones, and I'm not entirely sure if they're getting a bit worn out or a bit too old, but some of them have gone really hard and they're not really very chalky at all. So I thought if I do use these, it might be for trying to pick out a few little details to maybe add on at the end. So yep, those are the chalk pastels that I'm going to be working with, mainly the first two sets. This one for maybe a few details if I do use them at all. I'll just take those out of the way. And as I said, you can erase chalk pastel to maybe add in a few highlights or rub out any mistakes we make going over the edges. So I do have an eraser there. This is quite an old one because I don't want to wreck a new eraser by rubbing out loads of chalk pastel with it. So there's the eraser. And obviously I'm going to let myself use white gel pen because, yeah, that's pretty much a staple whenever I'm colouring anything. So yeah, I'm going to work on this picture. And I've looked up online, I've done a little bit of a Google search for forest, kind of fantasy forest imagery. And I know it does say this is supposed to be Mirkwood, a really creepy, dingy kind of forest that I remember from The Hobbit mainly. I don't know if it was in Lord of the Rings, but I remember it from The Hobbit being really creepy, dark and dingy. But I'm going to try and give it a bit more of a fantasy vibe, because those were the pictures that were calling to me when I was looking up the fantasy forest on Google earlier. So I might bring in a couple of the brighter colours, mainly in the middle. I want to try and make these wolves kind of the main visual point of the image. Keep the rest pretty dark with like the main highlights being around these wolves and see how that works out. I have no idea how this will turn out. I have never tried anything like this before. It was just a random fleeting idea I had, thinking maybe I could try colouring a whole picture. And maybe one of these landscapes would fit the bill because it's not something I would be drawn to colour normally. As anybody who watches the channel will know that I don't like colouring trees at all. So yeah, this would be one of my worst nightmare pictures to actually colour in with detail. I know everybody's different. Some of you might look at that and think, oh goodness, she's wasting that whole picture by trying to draw pastels on it. But no, it's not something that I would normally colour, not something I'm drawn to at all. Apart from the wolves, I do love wolves. So yeah, I figured this would be an ideal kind of picture to try out this technique on. So I do have some cotton buds to help with the blending, and I've got my tried and trusted Kleenex tissues there to do a little bit of blending and see what effects we can get going on. So yeah, nothing left to do but to jump right into it. Stop stalling, just jump right into it and see what we can get going on. As usual, I have not tested any of these in the paper in the book, so I'm just jumping right in and hoping that this actually works. I'm going to be starting with these pastels here. I have no idea what to call them. I couldn't make out any manufacturer name or anything on them, but that's the set I'm going to be using. And the colours obviously don't have any names or numbers, so I will just have to show you the colour that I'm using. I'll just take us in maybe a little bit closer there so you can see a little bit better what I'm actually trying to do. And I'm all set up with my little reference image in the background. I do seem to be using a lot of reference images at the moment, which I don't usually do. So I'm thinking maybe to start from the actual wolves, where I want my kind of spotlight to be, with all the rest being a lot darker, a few little spots of colour here and there. There is some pink and some turquoise in the image that I'm looking at, as well as some nice kind of mossy green, mainly around the kind of spotlit area in the middle, because the one I'm looking at is a path through the woods heading to like a sort of moon gate, like a round tunnel in the middle of the picture. So I'm going to start there with the wolves and probably be stopping and having to use the fixative. The fixative that I do have is this one, Winsor & Newton fixative. Hopefully I have enough in there that will be lasting for this picture. And yeah, chalk pastel does rub off really, really easily, so I will be having to use the fixative. I just actually made a little start there before I remembered. Yeah, we're going to get messy, so best to be adding in some scrap paper into the background there. just to protect any surfaces or the rest of the pages in the book. And okay, and this is a very light kind of aqua blue colour, so I'm hoping that this will be about the same as what's going on in my kind of referenced image. And I'm not trying to be super neat and tidy here going around these walls, because we can erase. My walls are usually white anyway. I try to make my walls white. So hopefully those walls will be white, and with this light area of colour around them, we'll be able to pick those out as being the focal point. And as usual, I'm not aiming to completely copy this picture that I am looking at, but it does have this blue of the sky getting darker as we come away from that focal point, but I'm hoping that we can layer on top of this first layer of sky and get some sort of a similar effect going on. Not exactly the same, as I said. And I really don't know much, haven't got much of a clue of what I'm doing here, so let's try blending that lighter blue in. It's not as light and bright as what's going on in the picture I'm looking at, but the picture that I'm looking at does seem to be a digital art of some description, so the colours are lovely and bright. There's some really fantasy pinks and blues going on, which looks really nice, with the edges being all dark, drawing the eye in towards the middle. The main problem is going to be all this chalk dust, I think. Might end up having to run those around once we've actually finished here today. Make sure there's none of the blue coming through onto there further. There is a little bit of yellow coming through in this image I'm looking at, sort of like a creamy yellow. I'm not entirely sure how that would work in this image, but we're here for the experiment, so let's give it a go. Is there anywhere that... see if we can pick out a few little bits of maybe sunlight, maybe along the edges of these trees, around where we've got our walls. Blending that slightly. I don't have much of an idea of the proper techniques for using chalk pastels. If anybody has any tips, as usual, yeah, I'm all ears. Please lay those out in the comments. But yeah, coming from a standpoint of someone who's just used chalk pastels as a background, I'm just bringing in a darker green here, kind of aqua green. Probably need to make that a little bit, add some black or something grey as we go out towards the edges of the image. I'm not entirely sure how many layers you can actually work with chalk pastel before we start being able to pick up the colour there on the paper. But the trees in the picture that I'm looking at, the trees and the leaves, they're darker than the background rather than being lighter. Apart from towards the front where there's a little bit of pink creeping in. Maybe these trees around the walls would be a little bit more of the green rather than the dark shady colours around the edges. We will see. Again, not really trying to stay within the lines too much, because I do want it to have that sort of loose, maybe watercolour wash sort of effect. The colours are not that bright, as I've said, because they are chalk pastels. Let's see if we can add another layer on top of that. We probably need to go for a more bluer colour heading towards those edges. Let's see, we do have this darker blue here, more of a navy blue. Let's see how well that would blend in. Of course, leaving the strokes of the pastel unblended is also a technique I suppose I could be using, but I'm guessing that would be for later on once I'm adding a few more slightly more detailed candle effects maybe. Just playing and experimenting. It'll probably turn out looking nothing like my reference. But I'm sure we can get something going on. Let's try blurring that out into the trees maybe a little bit as we are getting towards the edge here. And the trees we have in this image here, mostly the kind of very, very dark, almost black. And the nearest I could possibly get maybe is the actual black, or this dark brown. This dark brown that we have here maybe. And this tree is coming into our light, so this one, especially down there towards the walls, we would have to try and keep to the actual more realistic colours, I suppose. Although it is a fantasy forest, so... Do we have a dark green? We don't have a dark green. We have a dark green in this set, in the Inscribe set, so I'm going to try bringing in that darker green before I go over the top with the black, I'm thinking. And as you can see, these ones from the Inscribe set, they seem to be a lot softer. Maybe we can try blending that with the cotton bud. These ones have a lot more dust. Okay, just checking I was actually on camera, and I did nudge the ring lamp there, so if the lighting has gone a little bit skew-iff now, I do apologise for that. Yeah, the ring lamp nearly fell. So yeah, I really have no clue whether this experiment will succeed or fail, but the aim is to actually make the video and bring that out in any case, so we can see at least how not to do it if I am completely going to fail. Okay, a little bit green, we'll blend in this brown. And coming towards the wolves, yeah, we will be looking at the lighter colours. Maybe that's where I will bring in the gel pen once I've actually fixed. We need to bring in the darker kind of aqua colour here. The edges, the very edges of the image I'm looking at, are pretty much full on black, so let's try just maybe defining a few sort of shapes here. That's the old Mirkwood. I think we can, yeah, afford to go a lot darker as we would in the normal forest. We'll blend that into the darker blue. And down here. Brown. Completely making it up as I go here. There's not a lot of brown in the actual picture I'm looking at, but in the area where the light is hitting, there is a little bit of a lighter green that I will try to bring in. Let's try blending in that black. Figuring it out as we go, as per usual. Yeah, not entirely sure this is working right now. The eraser will lift some, but not completely all of these layers that we have going on. The hope is that with the wolves being picked out in the middle there, then we don't need a whole lot of this forest. Trees are not something that I do colour very much at all, even with even with my normal methods, so this is all completely uncharted territory for me. Just starting to lose the lines here a little bit now. Maybe I've gone a little bit too crazy. Maybe looking a little bit dark. Yeah, adding in some of this light green seems to be helping, yeah. Just to pick out the highlights. Maybe if I bring in a little bit of the gel pen around there, that might help. We're going to have to clean the gel pen quite a lot if we are working on top of this before it's fixed. I want to try and give it a sort of sketchy vibe. Maybe bring in a lot more of this lighter green around where we do want our focal point to be. Down these wolves where we want that kind of turquoisey colour sky. Bringing in a thinner sort of chalk pastel now. Trying to be a little bit arty, a little bit kind of painterly, because that seems to be the way it's heading. There's no point trying to be dainty, I don't think, doing anything like this. And maybe we can make this work if we keep it more along the arty side, kind of painterly side. More visible strokes, I'm thinking. Not quite so blended. Not the original plan. I'll admit my original plan was to make it more of a kind of watercolour wash over the pen and ink, but we don't seem to be headed that way. I have fixed this very slightly so I could work on top with the white gel pen. I think the way I'm going to be going is not trying to pick out so much detail. Keep it pretty kind of impressionistic, sort of painterly. There's some little mushrooms there down in the corner. It seems a shame to just colour over those. Maybe I'll bring in a little bit of red from the Inscribe Pastels. Maybe a little bit of this darkest red. Maybe we should have had a bit more sky coming through there. It's just a little bit of a messy approach compared to how I usually try and stay pretty neat, even though I'm not the most neatest of colourer. I've never been completely neat at colouring. But this is, yeah, completely going the opposite way I usually try. I'm going to try and pick out the lighter green, as if the light is coming from this area here. The lighter green would be around this kind of area. Let's try and keep it pretty loose. Do we have, is this water? No, I think it's all green grass. And a little bit of shadows picked out. I think around where our walls are, where we want that highlight to be. Right now I'm thinking, yep, this really isn't working. This is from the Inscribe set as well. This is another shade of green. So we're going to try and blend from that darker green to the mid-tone green to the light green into the middle there. Let's see what we can make of that. At the moment, not holding out super much hope for this picture, but I'm going to persevere, see what we can end up making. This is why I did pick a picture that I didn't think I would ever possibly colour, because yeah, we do seem to be heading for completely messing up territory here. And I didn't really want to be messing up any picture that I would maybe want to colour at some point. I pick out a few highlights with the eraser here towards the middle. Tried a little bit more of the fixative there. Hopefully I'll be able to go on top, once that's dry, go on top with the white gel pen again. And trees a little bit towards the front, so I'll give them a little bit of yellow. Maybe along there where we want our light source to be. Still not entirely sure whether this is working, whether I should continue on. But we will give it a go. Just going ahead, I think, and picking out a few edges and things with the white gel pen is bringing a bit more kind of interest and giving a bit more of a sort of arty, painterly sort of idea to it. More sketchy. It's not really what I was expecting, not entirely what I was trying to actually accomplish. Let's see how we do end up. Maybe we could try blending over the top of that white gel pen, see if we can dull it down a little bit. Oh, I quite like that. So it's not so stark white. And really bringing in that darkness around the edge. So you are looking into a murky forest. We are actually going for Mirkwood now, less than the enchanted kind of forest that I'm actually looking at in my picture here. Definitely a little bit of an experiment. You can definitely tell. Experimental. I don't think it entirely failed. Maybe I'll leave it until it's more closer to being done to whether deciding it's a complete failure or not. But for now, I'll play with it a little bit, I think. Try a little bit of erasing here. Pick out these leaves. So that first layer was fixed. This darker layer is not. Again, as a kind of experiment. The mushrooms seem to have a little bit of a glow to them, so let's play to that. Make them little glowy mushrooms. Yeah, we're definitely looking less like a watercolour painting. I'm not sure if this white. Yeah, we can actually work on top with the white, so let's see. Some sort of vague leafy texture there. I think this is definitely going to be one. If it does work at all, it will work from a distance. I'm still not super convinced here. But we do want the forest to be dark, so maybe the picture as a whole will work once so we just have that light area in the middle with our wolves. So maybe I should branch out instead of concentrating on the one area and get myself all hung up and not liking how it's going. Let's see how it all works out in the big picture. Because at the other side of the picture we would mainly have no light at all getting there. I think if we have this edge of the picture bringing in those dark colours more, really spotlighting onto those wolves, maybe we might be onto something. I'm not entirely sure there, but we'll keep the darker blue to the sky. Now are we on camera? Yeah. It's kind of hard to get this whole book into the view. So yeah, basically this whole side of the page, up to about here I would imagine, would be dark. Maybe coming a little bit further in towards the middle. Going to have our light area here. On this page at least, it's not going to be any kind of a focal point. I will try and remember to put up a little bit of a warning at the beginning of the video for any arachnophobics out there. Yeah, these these giant spiders are not the prettiest. We'll try and blend them in, I think, maybe. The wolves are what we're focusing on. To be honest, I didn't think about the spiders. My apologies, people. I didn't think about the spiders when I first started colouring this picture. Maybe I should have stuck to the waterfall. This side we're going to be going more for the dark and the mid-green. Behind the leaves, you giant spider. That's my mid-tone green. There we are. Yeah, we'll try and blend in those spiders. Just colouring like a kid here. This is quite fun. As I've said, not entirely convinced with the outcome, but at least the whole process is fun. Might need to get a new tissue in a minute. This one is looking a little bit worse for wear, but we'll try blending in this. Greens and blues. Pick out the details with the black is what I'm thinking over on this side, because we are in the deep dark forest now. Less of the enchanted forest, more of actual murkwood. I think our lighter colours would start to come in around those wolves. Tidy up around the frame. A little bit, as I've said, it's not one picture that I'm totally invested in. Okay, so we're going to lean into the messy, kind of grungy sort of painting look I seem to have been going for, which is a far cry from the sort of watercolour washy picture that I originally envisioned. But it does seem to be the way we're going. And we're definitely heading more towards the murky, dark and dingy actual murkwood than I imagined, but I'm sure Tolkien himself would improve. Mirkwood isn't meant to be a light, chirpy fantasy forest. The spiders I don't really want to be much of a focal point at all. I'm not a huge fan of them. Not scared of them or anything, but yeah. We'll bring in a lot more of the black on this side, I think, even up into the sky. Not even looking at my original little inspiration picture now. I've diverted quite considerably from the original inspiration here. Not turning out to be actually as quick as I really envisioned as well, mainly because the false starts over on that side that I really didn't know what I was doing, trying to figure out how to actually cope with this image, which wasn't going, as we figured, it wasn't going entirely to plan. But I think we have grasped it now. And if we don't fight it, we just work with how it seems to be going. Oh, should we make those more glowy mushrooms? I'm thinking maybe we should. Where's the red? I think it might have been this red. Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, let's just have some fun with it. Not entirely sure if that's a slightly darker red, but if it is, this is a more shadowy side of the image anyways. Let's blend these with the cotton bud, try and... It looks as if it's pretty dark on this side with not many details to be actually picked out. Aside from what those little mushrooms will be lighting up in a second. It is quite a good exercise in being pretty loose, I think. I don't think I would ever tackle one of my usual pictures this way. More kind of loose and grungy. With this amount of black. Okay, mushrooms. Mushrooms would be... Let's make these mushrooms glowy. Or some sort of fungus. Technically not mushrooms, they're growing on the tree. Some sort of fungus. It just might be fun to have some kind of glowy red kind of fairy tale mushrooms each side. Picking out a few little bits of detail. Look at that moss. Maybe we can bring in the light green. And the yellow. Maybe a tiny bit onto that spider there. So you can see there's something there, but not quite what it is. Fun. Maybe going a little bit overboard with the black this side, so I'm going to lean into it. This forest is dark. Maybe I can even bring in the tissue just to darken the whole thing. You can't see anything in this forest, man. This is Mirkwood. Oh yes, that is working. Okay, let's pick out the edge of that tree because we do have a glowy kind of fungus there. Maybe a little bit on that tree trunk. Right, now I'm leaning into it. Now we are enjoying this now. It's starting to somehow come together. Let's try and have a few more visible strokes with this black. The kind of grungy painting look. I think at the beginning, yeah, maybe I was fighting it a bit too much. I had the idea in my head of having the washy kind of watercolor effects going on, and it just wasn't working, and that was getting me a little bit frustrated. So I think now I've lent into it a little bit more, working with it being the kind of grungy, more rougher sort of, maybe an acrylic painting style rather than watercolor. But I think, yeah, I can kind of get behind it now. Coming further into this middle where we want our light coming from on screen. it's a bit hard, kind of trying to keep everything on screen here. You can also blend with your finger, obviously with chalk pastels, but I think there's a bit too much blending involved here to use my finger all the time. Darker green in for a few more kind of scribbles. A bit of reflection here. That spider is no focal point. We don't really want to dwell too much on those spiders. They're meant to be kind of camouflaged anyways. There, just a sort of hint. That's cool. I like that. And we're coming into the more brighter colours as we're getting further into the middle here. I just coloured the sky green, but because we're going for such a messy kind of painterly sort of approach, it doesn't really matter too much, I don't think. You're not going to be able to tell. Okay, we're coming into the spine of the book here. Try and keep it all on camera. We're going to be getting more of the highlights, more of the brighter colours, because I want my attention to be on the wolves, which are going to be my usual kind of white wolves, I think. Have those pretty bright in the middle there. Maybe a little touch of shading with the grey or very light brown, maybe. Have those wolves going on there, that should be quite interesting. Drawing attention away from the creepy crawlies. We don't want the creepy crawlies to be dragging any attention. That's not the first place we want people to be looking, so yeah, we're kind of trying to minimise the spiders, or I am anyways. Of course, in your colouring you could focus on the spiders if you really wanted to. But wolves, I like wolves, so my wolves are going to be my focal point here. Light green, especially in this middle here, but we do want to start to get our darker colours creeping in on this bottom area. This darker green here, and then a mid-tone sort of green. I don't really have a huge palette of colours in chalk pastels, so we're kind of trying to adapt a little bit. We do have a few shades of green, a few shades of brown, so I figured, yeah, some sort of landscape would lean into that really. And usually I think you would work on top of any kind of chalk pastel with pencil if you were working in a colouring book. But this from the get-go is a kind of experiment to see if you could work almost exclusively with the chalk pastels. Of course I have brought in the white gel pen, because I always do, and I think, yeah, it does help to pull out those highlights. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get right into the spine of the book, but we'll have a bit of a go there. Black a little bit down here, I think. Chalk pastels, I think, would definitely work. Maybe a little bit better with a larger scale. Maybe I should have stuck with my original plan of having a really, really simple picture. But I think as long as you take on, it seems to me, just from this personal little experiment here, if you just take the more looser approach and use the effects that they can make to the best advantage, you can spread them about, blend out the colour. They do make some nice chunky blocky marks that you can bring in and use those. To give that kind of, like I said, the painterly or kind of arty, maybe impressionistic sort of approach. The picture I was looking at was more of a fantasy, sort of Disney fantasy woods, I think, with lots of light, bright turquoisey blues and some fuchsia pink sort of colours. More of the pink towards the front. But I really don't think that would work for this. Now I've started actually working on the picture. I mean, my original plan was to bring in the blue and the pink colours, make it more of a fantasy woods, but yeah, Mirkwood is stubborn. We seem to be going for the dark, more Tolkien version of Mirkwood. Let's pick out these leaves with the eraser, not not being too dainty about it at all. And there's these here. I'm going for grungy now, so I'm not trying to be super dainty. We can bring in our light green. Bring in a little bit of yellow maybe. Pick out a few clumps of grass and stuff. Oh, yellowy green there is working on top of the black, so we are dulling it down very slightly. But as we're moving further away from that main kind of spotlight where the wolves are, we would be getting slightly darker colours. Yeah, hopefully on camera. Can't really check this far down, but we can bring the real dark and black starting to come in. Be a bit brave, try and make a few kind of grass or leaf shapes with that white. I'm not entirely sure that's working. Sweeping it upwards to look like a little bit of vegetation there at the bottom. Maybe we could do a bit of erasing a little bit on there. And then more gradually into that. And a shadow at the bottom. That works a little bit better, I think. Can't erase totally because I did fix the first layer there, but there we go. That seems to be working. Yeah, I quite like that. This is one of those times where I do wish I'd got around to purchasing a battery eraser, an electric eraser. I think that would work a lot better to be able to draw actually into the chalk pastel with. And what I'm thinking we need is this darker green maybe. The Inscribe pastels, they're a lot more pigmented, a lot softer, a lot more kind of vibrant colours to them. As I did say, I don't know if they are better quality or not. I'm no expert on chalk pastels. I've, before this, barely used them apart from the backgrounds. But I can recommend them. Very dusty though, and you do need to wash your hands. You need to break and wash your hands quite a lot. We do have some kind of cliff edges here. It is really quite hard to tell whether I'm on camera or not. We do have some sort of cliff edges here, some sort of grass banks. Let me just stand up now to see if I can get on the camera. Still be close enough for you to see what I'm doing. It's actually quite difficult. Hopefully you can see all the different colours we've got going on there. We do have actually 3 different shades of green. This is the mid-tone green. I think this one might be from the unnamed pastels that I can't find a maker for. Yeah, that's looking a bit slightly blurry. Kind of fake. But we want our spotlight to be on the wolves, so that's where all the detail is going to be, and the strongest contrast. Hopefully. Let's bring that mid-tone green into the trees up here. Even though I am liking it a little bit more now we've gone ahead and looking at it from a distance. It's not looking too bad. I will say that, yeah, you do need to look at this one from a distance to be able to get the full kind of picture of what I've actually aimed for and sort of gotten there. I've been keeping these brighter colours in there, in that middle there, where the wolves are. Maybe we need to bring in a slightly lighter brown. This is from the unnamed set. But this is never meant to be a tutorial. I do not profess to be able to teach anybody how to use chalk pastels. As a background, possibly, I can show you how to use chalk pastels as a background, but for colouring a whole picture, I'm not your girl. The whole point of today was just basically following along on a little bit of an experiment to see what we could get going on. It is definitely messy, and now that I've kind of figured out what I'm doing, it's sort of fun. And yeah, a lot quicker now I have sort of figured out what I'm doing. Trying to add a few little highlights there with the eraser. I'll go in with the gel pen. So going into the middle there where we are wanting the light to be. So I'll carry that highlight over onto these leaves, I think. Can be very scribbly though. I want to carry on that kind of messy painting sort of vibe that we had going on. I don't think the trees here need super much blending, but we will do a little bit. Nice colour brown there. It seems to be working quite well to highlight that middle. Any brighter colours or more concentrated colours do tend to grab attention, so I will keep those around where the wolves are. Keep all the saturation of colour like around this middle area here. I'm going to try and have the wolves themselves hopefully white, so I'm not entirely sure how I will accomplish that. First of all, let's colour these rocks. This is from the unnamed set. I'm not exactly sure what colour this is, kind of a greyish brown. Add a little bit of shading to those rocks where the wolves are standing. I'm running out of tissue paper here. Add a little bit of colour to these rocks. Tiny bit of the black. There's contrast. Contrast is another thing that does grab attention, so black and white, pretty high contrast there, so hopefully that will help grab the attention with the black on these rocks and the white. The white I'll be using for the highlights. Touch of green into these rocks by using the cotton bud we used to blend the green. I think adding a tad little bit of green into rocks kind of helps them look a little bit more natural. Personally, rocks in the woods would be growing moss and stuff, so let's see, shall we bring in this very light blue maybe for the wolves? A little bit of shading. Behind there, let's go in with this kind of saturated brown. A little bit of the green. Kind of fantasy style colours there for these trees in the middle. But it is grabbing the attention, so that's what we want really. Let's blend that little blue into the wolves. Not sure if we have kind of a cool grey colour that I could maybe bring into those wolves as well. I don't really want to bring the black into the actual wolves if I can help it. Maybe a little bit of this grey. I'll blend in this grey. We have a little bit of the golden yellow creeping in there, so that seems to be working actually, so let's lean into it, play that up. Because the sunlight would be shining on these wolves anyway, send our white highlights, bringing in the white into the black, as I said, trying to make a bit of contrast here in the middle, which is where we want our light. I think maybe we should add a little bit of that yellow to the actual rocks that our wolves are sitting on. Maybe going around the entire line art wasn't a great idea, so I might have to go back in and bring back that line art just with a fine line pen. The wolves are not standing out as much as I would have liked them to, so I'm going to try and add a little bit of that. The yellow. This wolf here, he seems to be the focal point, this little guy that's howling there. We could try strengthening the line art, I think, maybe. I did actually initially want both of those wolves to be a little bit of a focal point, but seems to be this guy who's howling that seems to be taking all the attention, which is, yeah, not a bad thing. I can work with that. Still does mean that the tension is in the middle of the picture where our lightest area is, so sort of a success, maybe. After a fairly shaky start, yeah, I'm not entirely displeased. Yeah, is the word. I'm not entirely displeased with how this turned out. From a distance, as I've been saying, from a distance, yeah, it works. It's like one of those paintings you need to see on the gallery wall, I think. Yeah, you need to step back. Because up close you just see all the brush marks. You step back and you can see the whole picture, and it works. It's really quite hard to get into the spine of the book though. Even with the mid-tone brown there, the slightly lighter one. There seems to be some sky I've missed out there. Go for the lighter blue. This tree would probably be blending into the darker brown on the further side. All these leaves here. It's possibly time to be washing my hands again. One of the problems with chalk pastel. Very messy. Okay, let's blend that tree. See if we can get into the spine there. I do want it to look like it is double page spread, because it is obviously a double page spread, so thinking as I said, this rubber is going to get pretty covered in the chalk pastel, or eraser rather. The eraser is getting rather covered in the chalk pastel, as I figured would probably happen, so that's why I wasn't using one of my better ones. Really playing up that looseness now, I think. Maybe we could even bring this brown into the foreground here, because we would have earth or dirt on the forest floor, I'm guessing. Maybe bringing that colour down a little bit. Hopefully that is showing up on the camera. It is in real life. If the colours don't match, as usual, I will try and adjust those in post-production, in editing. I'll need to swing around now. For anyone wondering about the cotton buds, I know they're kind of not environmentally friendly these days, but these ones from Tesco, you can see there, just as a disclaimer, 100% cotton tips and paper stems, so no single-use plastics. Really, adding a few more of these white highlights around where we've got our wolves. While we wait for the darker side of the woods to dry over there. Not much detail to be picked out on the other side of the page, but to make it the full 2-page spread, I will color in the dark and murky side of the forest. This is the darkest green from the Inscribe pastels. This is furthest away. We'll probably blend more into the mid-tone green. Getting further towards the middle there. It is, as I said, yeah, a pretty good exercise in loosening up, because you can't really be detailed if you're working this small with chalk pastels. I was tempted to work in my Game of Thrones colouring book, the giant one, the HBO one, but I only really have one flesh tone, one kind of a light skin tone, and I'm not totally confident with shading any faces or skin with my chalk pastels, at least at the moment. So yeah, we've stuck with the trees. We have a lot more black over on this side, because this is the darkest side of the forest. I'm making it so the light is just coming through the trees there, shining onto the wolves. I'm also not really confident with making any sunbeams shining down onto them. Well, it could possibly be done before it's fixed by using the eraser, I would imagine, but I've never really tried that before, and I think trying out one technique at a time in a video is probably about as much as I can handle without totally stressing myself out. We do have a giant tree there coming out from the shadows. But I don't think it would have super much highlights on it. I'm just going to try and make sure it's just a tiny bit lighter than the rest of the background. So it does look as if it's forward, but get a little tiny bit of a highlight there along that trunk with the eraser. And because the line art is underneath the quite detailed pen line art, I think we might be able to get away with not really shading that too much, just picking out these branches maybe. This lighter green coming into the leaves here, just as we did on the other side a little bit, and then mid-tone green. I don't really colour trees and leaves all that often, so I'm no expert on it anyways. But this side of the picture, hopefully, we have made our spotlight onto the wolves, or at least one of them in the middle there, this little guy doing his howling up on the stone. He's the focal point, apparently. I did want it to be on the pair of the wolves there, but yeah, he seemed to have stolen the show. Yeah, we do want to start as we get closer to that middle there, having the details more picked out. It's a lighter kind of greeny blue, so we'll fill in a bit more of that sky. Working around the spine is, yeah, especially difficult when you have such a chunky kind of medium that you're trying to use. Another tree in the background there. It's a very slightly brighter brown. And this tree here. Thinking we'll probably be starting to have highlights coming through. Yep, and there we go. Probably still start having the highlights coming through on these leaves here. So a few scribbles, not even trying to follow the line art that closely. As you can tell, yeah. So wobbly scribbles to give some sort of indication of light hitting the leaves there. But we do want to leave our spiders in the dark, so I don't want to be too enthusiastic with my highlights. Trying to gauge how I did it on the other side of the page to sort of try and match it up. Let's bring a little bit of that lighter green, the yellow green, over onto this side of the page. Not super much though, I want the main bulk of this page to be in the dark. I do have a little bit of mid-tone green here. Darker green. It's only very slightly darker, but hopefully it's enough of a variation to look as if there are different types of plants there. We can add some shadows in blacks and highlights with the white gel pen, or even the white pastel. The spider's hiding just beyond the reach of the light. Yeah, that works. We have sky there. Blend in the strokes a little bit less as we're getting further towards that kind of spotlight area. Just to maybe give a tiny little bit more detail. This is the plan. I don't know if that's how chalk pastels are supposed to work, or experimental at the moment. Let's bring in a little bit of yellow onto our spider's bum there. I want to see there's something there, just not quite what it is at first glance. I think the spiders do tend to hide actually in Markwood, so that kind of makes sense. Oh, we do have another spider there. I never even noticed that one. That one's definitely hiding in the shadows. This tree is more towards our spotlight area, so you would have more of the lighter colours coming in there. Maybe have that lighter green continuing through the spine there, but it's quite hard to get into. I just stand up to try and be able to angle into that spine there. My forte is not colouring greenery at all. So at the moment just hoping this looks somewhat right. Do have the rest of that tree continuing the other side of the page, so I'll try and have something similar. I'll come back over to this area. We'll add some yellow to these kind of clumps of grass, sort of cliffs. They look like cliffs. If they were bigger, they'd be cliffs. But we'll add some little bits of the yellow there, and the white gel pen. Quite a lot of highlights on this tree, I think, because we are close to where we have our little spotlit area. I think we maybe gone a little bit too light there, so I'll try blending a bit of the brown over those white highlights, which is quite a handy little thing that I figured does work. Let's highlight the edge of this tree. Let's see. Might stand for it because it's pretty close to the foreground there. Oh, there are some more mushrooms there. But I think just the two lots of little glowy mushrooms is enough for us, I think. I'll do a few little highlights here just to show where the edge of the shadow is coming. Shadowy area of the forest. Just kind of creeping in. These trees in the background here we have barely picked out, but yeah, just a few little highlights I think to give a suggestion there's something there, and that's all we're really going to need because it's that far side of the picture where there's not really a lot of detail anyway, and there is where we're going to be looking, where all these brighter colours are, in theory. Once I zoom out, that should in theory be working because we've made this into the focal point by using the brighter colours, the lighter colours, less of the black, a lot of white highlights, and the contrast between these dark rocks and hopefully the white wolves, which look more of a very light grey than they do white, but that'll do. That should have also helped give a bit of sense of depth to the forest as well. I think maybe I shouldn't concentrate too much on that middle of the page because we're not going to be able to get a pastel down there very well, I don't think. And it's not that visible. But our whole picture has been pretty loose, so I don't think it'll matter too much that we kind of taper off towards that middle. It's very hard to get in there, so I wouldn't worry about it super much. If I was colouring with pencils or anything along those lines, then maybe, but this isn't the type of picture, as I've said before, this isn't the type of picture that I would usually colour, being of trees. I don't do trees, landscapes, anything like that usually, so it's not really one I would normally colour, but as a bit of an experiment and just a little bit of a play with these chalk pastels, I think it's been, once I got over my initial kind of fumblings here in this corner, I think it's been pretty fun, and yeah, I would say fairly successful. I've accomplished what I set out to do, which was see if I could colour a whole picture with the chalk pastels, and I think, yeah, we have managed to do that. And I did learn a few things, so I'll probably be calling it round about there, I think, unless I spot anything else I need to work on when I'm zoomed out. So I will zoom us out now. Okay, I've zoomed us out a little bit now so we can see the whole finished picture, and I've got to say that I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, considering at the beginning I was really in two minds whether it was actually working or not, but once I adjusted my technique and kind of stopped aiming for that enchanted forest kind of light and airy look, and instead I went for that creepy dark forest kind of vibe, I think that's where things turned around and I started liking how it was going, and yeah, that was the way to go, I think. Keeping it pretty sketchy, kind of painterly, maybe impressionistic, with the visible strokes with the chalk pastel. I think it's kind of worked in our favour there. I really do like the way we have our light area here around the wolves, with everything getting really darker as we move away from there, from our little spotlight in the middle there. I do love these little mushrooms that we've got either end. I love those, how they've come out sparkling in the darkness there. I think we did manage to get a sense of depth in there, with these wolves looking pretty far back in the forest and the foreground really coming forward there. I like the way the white gel pen is working on top of the chalk pastel, especially in these darker areas here, picking out a few little light areas, keeping it really sketchy. And once we'd fixed the chalk pastel, it was a lot easier to work with the gel pen on top, so that's another lesson learned. And all in all, it was quite a good experiment to figure out how to use chalk pastels, how you can blend them and just use the pastel strokes to create different effects, how it all works together. I did end up going over the edges with some really thin kind of silver washi tape just to neaten up the edges because chalk pastels are a pretty messy medium to be using. We did go over the edges quite a lot and we couldn't quite erase all of the marks that we had going on. You can see down here there's a few little marks there. I don't think it really takes away from the picture too much because we do have our wolves there as the focal point and that's where people will be looking with a bit of luck. So yeah, as I said, all in all, not too bad, pretty successful I think. And even if the picture itself hadn't worked, I think the whole experiment idea, figuring out how to use the chalk pastels, that was the main point of this picture, because this wasn't a picture that I normally would colour, being trees and kind of landscapes, stuff like that. That's not something I do usually colour. It's not my forte at all, it's not my jam, so I really don't colour trees or forest, things like that. So I don't think if I hadn't picked something like this to work with that I would have ever coloured this picture. So that is a good way to use pictures that are not really in your wheelhouse, not really to your taste. Maybe try out new mediums. That way you're not really too bothered whether you do mess up or not. Of course, it would have been a little bit of disappointment if I did mess up on this one, especially as I was filming it for you guys to see the process I was going through here. But it did work out quite well in the end. So I'm going to keep it as a learning experience, and it did teach me quite a lot about using chalk pastels. Once I actually settled into it and figured out more of what I was doing, I did start to really enjoy myself. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed following along with me as well. If you did enjoy watching the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.